Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, constant reader Scott Daly, and joining me as always, he's the bullet slowly burrowing its way deeper and deeper into my brain. It's Matt Friedman. How's it going today, Matt?
Oh, I'll get there any day now.
Any day
Working
now.
my way towards the old medulla oblongata. I don't really know any.
Just working your way downtown.
Yep.
This week, our 8-part series covering Stephen King's Duma Key continues with part 3. We'll be chatting about chapters 8 through 10 of the novel, in which Edgar learns more about his special painting skills as he manages to not only murder a bad guy, but also save his best friend. Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
This is great. We're escalating the supernatural element of things. We're revealing more about the characters. We're creating some really great moments. We're just getting deeper into things, and I'm really loving it.
Man, it's so funny. This book, the one refrain I had reading the book this week is like, Jesus Christ, this is so gothic. And it's like, the funny thing about that is I'm not even like picturing a specific element of gothic literature when I think that. I'm just like reading it and I'm like, oh man, that's so gothic. Like the nails on his phantom limb continuing to grow. Oh, that feels so fucking gothic. Him painting this picture in the middle of this giant thunderstorm. Just like, oh man. It's like it's all over the place.
Yeah. And yet they're appearing in kind of these weird, unaccustomed contexts that makes it feel really interesting and fresh.
Oh yeah. No, it's great. It's great. I agree with you. This is good stuff. I think this is my favorite of the 3 sections we've read so far. So the book is only getting better as we're going along.
Yep.
All right, let's get into it. Before we do that, though, quick announcement. We are going to be doing our book club this Friday, the 1st of March. And we're going to be covering this month Tana French's The Searcher. We are big Tana French fans here at Doof Media, and it's been a while, Matt, since we've talked about a Tana French book, so I'm very much looking forward to this.
Me too. I enjoyed this one, and it'll be a fun conversation, so please join us on Friday.
Yep, it'll be at 9:30 Central Time over on our YouTube channel. I think you can, I don't remember if our YouTube is like just our name. I think it's just like YouTube Doof Media. I don't know how that works.
YouTube.com/Doof Media.
I think that's just it. Yeah.
Hey, it worked.
Hey, we did it. So yeah, just head on over to there, 9:30. We'll also put that in all our socials and everything if you follow us anywhere. But we're gonna be just chatting about that book for about 90 minutes or so. So if you've never joined us live for a book club, I think this is a great book to do it for, because it's a really good book.
Yep.
All right, let's get into it. We begin with chapter 8, titled Family Portrait. And our first chapter of the week begins with one of those classic "and times moved quietly on from here" moments. I love how King writes this, though. It says, "Things slowed down for a while. Sometimes that happens. The pot boils, and then just before it can boil over, some hand, God, fate, maybe plain coincidence, lowers the heat. I mentioned this once to Wireman. He said, life is like Friday on a soap opera. It gives you the illusion that everything is going to wrap up, and then the same old shit starts up on Monday."
That's so good. I think this is a sense that becomes particularly strong when you're in a part of your life that you're not enjoying. For example, suffering from chronic pain. You're like, man, I'm really ready for this part of my life to be over. And that's just not the way life works.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I just love the way he writes this, and like I feel like the reason, and we're going to talk all about these King type characters at the very, very end of the episode, but the reason why he enjoys writing characters like this so much is because he can put in all these little sayings and ideas and references. Like Wireman feels like a King insert character in ways that the protagonist of these books aren't, because Wireman is just like constantly quoting from movies and stories and has all these random bits of knowledge and trivia and all these things. It's just so fun.
Yeah, it's clearly a character that he's having a lot of fun writing.
Mm-hmm. So meanwhile, the daily life of Duma Key goes on. Wireman says he will go to the doctor with Edgar, but not till March. February is far too busy with all the monthlies, which he calls them, coming to hide out on Duma Key during the winter. Wireman, Matt, is basically the the focal point of these few chapters, his Wireman himself, his friendship with Edgar, and of course what Edgar eventually does for him by the end of this week's reading. And so these moments here early on where they're just kind of hanging out talking really serve to show us how their friendship is growing, how it's expanding, how it's deepening. I think they're really really key pivotal moments that are just like, and nothing much happened and we just talked.
Yeah, that's a good point. It also supports my sense that Wireman is sort of the character that the story is interested in. He's not the protagonist, he's not the main character, but he is that background, interesting, mysterious character that the story is interested in. But it's actually more fun that it's third person, because then we don't see it in Wireman's head, but we hear all of Wireman's witticisms, and Wireman's life is this interesting mystery that we see from afar.
Yeah, I agree. I loved calling him that character in Gothic literature, the one on which the mystery kind of turns, and
Mhm.
Elizabeth is that too as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, both of these random characters living together in this loving, but not sexual at all relationship in this mysterious old house. It's just, man, I said at the beginning of the show, it's just so Gothic.
So Gothic. I'm sure there's exceptions to the rule, but I feel like it's pretty common in Gothic literature for there to be multiple different people with sort of different yet possibly intertwining mysteries living at the old, Gothic house up on the hill.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising that there are both Elizabeth and Wireman here.
I agree. I really liked this part too, Matt. It says, I thought, and not for the first time, that Wireman was one of the very few men I ever met in my adult life who could consistently tell me no without making me angry. He was a genius of no. Sometimes I thought it was him. Sometimes I thought it was the accident that had changed something in me. Sometimes I thought it was both. Not to relitigate our Pam conversation, which I'm going to do a little bit later, but I think this is yet another little bit of information about pre-book Edgar. Like this idea that uh, that this is one of the only men in my life that could tell me no without pissing me off. Just
Yeah,
just a little bit of what Edgar was like before everything went down.
it does give us that. And I mean, my read on this, him saying sometimes I thought it was me, sometimes I thought it was Wireman, sometimes both. I'm like, the way I'm reading this character, I'm leaning heavily toward, yeah, it's mostly that it's something in you has changed,
Hmm.
Edgar, because we haven't really seen his temper flare up like ever in this book. Now, I'm not saying he hasn't gotten mad. He's thrown a doll at a wall,
Hmm.
he's gotten mad. But other than the mention of him trying to choke Pam, which happened sort of outside of the span of time of this novel, we haven't really seen him get mad at a person, you know,
Yeah.
at all, right? And this is apparently a huge part of his life beforehand. So it just seems like he's mellowed out. And the book doesn't really frame it this way, but uh, a lot of people who've had near death experiences talk about how that experience puts things in perspective, and puts them in a place where it's like, how can anything really make you upset or angry now? You just avoided being crushed by a crane. You're like, who cares if somebody failed to book your dinner reservation accurately? It's like, there's nothing in this world worth being upset about anymore. And
Hmm.
Edgar doesn't characterize it that way, but you do see that happen a lot with people who've been through experiences like that.
Yeah, I like that. And I think you're totally right that I think we've seen him get angry while talking with Pam, but he has managed to keep hold and keep that anger from spilling out into actually yelling at her, screaming at her, that kind of thing. He's managed to keep a lid on that for sure.
Exactly.
So this opening chapter also includes a few emails back and forth, some of them from Ilsa, and I know we haven't talked much about this father-daughter relationship yet, but I really love it, Matt. I really do. Like this idea that, and we'll revisit this a little bit later in the chapters as well. But this is a character who's kind of navigating the confusion of what having a relationship with an adult, like being a parent to an adult child, and what that is like, and what that means, and how the choices you have to make, and the ways in which you have to like watch them fail, or make choices that you wouldn't, but you're not Like you're not the focal point of their life anymore, so you have to let them do these things. Like it's all really interesting, and it's pretty clear that Edgar was not like a perfect parent, through the childhood of his children. But I do feel like he's got this thing, at least with 50% of his kids, he's got this kind of adult uh parent thing down.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think this is a really interesting book for the reasons you just pointed out. Very rarely do we write about the parent-child relationship, in an adult context from the parent side. Like we love to
Yeah.
write about it from the child side. I can think of so many books that were from like an adult perspective talking about how shitty their parent was, um, and
Uh-huh.
we also love to have parents with small kids because then the child can be sort of an object of risk when there's stakes, right?
Yeah.
I can't count that many books that are really interested in the parent side of the equation of being the parent of an adult child.
Hmm.
Um, and I like that the book is going there because it's this really interesting and mature take on it. There's what we see over and over is that Edgar's having to sort of make these impossible calls where he's kind of damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. And, really for an adult child, there's a lot of just like kind of having to bite your tongue, kind of having to step back and let them make choices
Yeah.
because it's not your job anymore to keep them from burning their hand on the stove. It's
Hmm.
like you are there to help them if something really goes off the rails, but you're not really meant to interfere in their life all that much. And it's really
Yeah.
interesting watching Edgar's thought process and watch him make these choices.
Yeah, I mean, and this is certainly something that King himself has to be maybe not going through exactly at the time of the writing of this novel, because his kids, I think, were in their 20s and 30s by the time he was writing this book. But um, it is something that he's definitely thinking about and dealing with. It is, he has 3 children and they're all grown up by this point, and that's a completely new relationship that none of those parenting books prepare you for sure. I,
Yeah.
I I mean, you and I are still a long way away from that relationship. Me more so than you, but I can already kind of imagine it, and I'm just not going to know what to do at all.
It's really interesting because I feel like there's all kinds of advice that you can give to parents of younger children where it's like, look, everybody has these problems.
Hmm.
Here's what you do. For like the problems that adult children face are just the problems that adults face. And so
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
like, there's not general solutions to those. And especially, like I said a second ago, very often part of the dynamic is like, no, dad, this is my problem. I need to solve my own problem. Right. And then
hmm,
it's just becomes so complicated and subtle in so many ways. So yeah, I appreciate that the book
yeah.
is going here.
Yeah, I mean, basically learning that it is your job in those cases to not say anything, to step away, to yeah, as you said, bite your tongue. That is
Hmm.
that is that is what your role is now, and then
Yep.
be there for them if they have questions or need help. Or yeah, what a confusing thing. I mean, it's like we are still navigating this thing with our parents, right? Like that's as you said, people write about our side of this thing a little bit more than they write about the elder side of it. But it's just really fascinating.
It is.
And then Pam calls. And okay, now we all hate Pam, right? It is
Yeah.
known.
We all like
Pam
Pam.
sucks, right? However, we learn in this phone call that she did actually do what Edgar asked her to do. She confronts Tom about his suicide, and we're told via the conversation that most likely she successfully prevented Tom's suicide, which is great news. Wonderful news. She saved a life. They saved a life collectively. But she's not doing too great, Matt. She's not.
Oh no. Poor Pam.
So this is kind of part of what the conversation is here. Pam started to cry. She honked, then surprised me by laughing. It was bitter, but also surprisingly good humored. When do you suppose your strange ability to induce my tears runs out? Tell me what happened, Panda. And no more of that. Call me that again and I'm hanging up. So, like, Pam sucks, right?
Uh-huh.
But, like, that was a really emotional, tough thing she had to do right then, right? Like, and I like the use of panda by Edgar is admittedly by him manipulative. Like that's like when he doesn't think about saying it at the time, but like subconsciously he used it the first time to manipulate her, to guilt her into doing these things, and now he brings it up here again, and she's just like, no, stop that. I'm not, like, we're not married anymore. This is that's not a name you can call me anymore. That's like fair, right?
Uh-huh. Sure. I mean, in this conversation, despite the fact that she is sort of excessively rude, as you say, she did do the thing that she had to do, and she tells him, and they communicate reasonably effectively. I wonder, I didn't say this last time because we were just having fun ragging on Pam, but I do think, like, what is the function of Pam in the story? Like, are we talking about this man and his mending of his relationship with his ex-wife into something functional, or is this more about him discovering something about himself through this relationship with her?
Yeah.
Is she going to actually become, crucial to the plot in some way? That's always possible, right?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I like that.
I don't know the answer, right? Because it definitely feels like there's some, strangeness to this relationship, as we've said several times. But
yeah,
it's certainly, yeah. Go ahead.
Just my grand defense of Pam is coming. I don't want to do it right here because I think there's more points around it when he calls her back to tell her about the painting of her he just made. But yes, I think it's a fair question to be like, okay, what is the purpose of this? In like, because like I think we can see, the purpose of Ilsa and the relationship of Ilsa and how that's going, and around Wireman, around Elizabeth, like these questions and the things that are happening on Duma Key and happening to Edgar. But yeah, Pam is kind of this out there mystery, so I think it's fair to be asking that question.
Yeah.
So Pam, the one thing in this conversation that happens though is Pam wants to know how Edgar could possibly have known about Tom's suicidal ideation from thousands of miles away. Edgar decides to come clean. I think the quote he says when he relays this information to Wireman is that without my lawyer present, I was forced to rely on the truth, which is just a great turn of phrase there. He tells her all about his painting of her and her lovers and the magical ghost Tom that appears in his house. And like, I don't know, man, like the second I read this, I was like, oh, that's a bad call you just made there, Edgar. Like Pam basically just takes this information and adds this to her already, existing concern about Edgar's mental health and just thinks he's gone crazy. And like, fair, right? Like, imagine your ex calls you up and tells you they have magical painting powers. You're not just gonna be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
No, it's definitely interesting. It's an interesting choice, right? I mean, we're in Edgar's head, so it's funny. The decision feels justified from inside Edgar's head because you're like, oh, this is character growth. He's refusing to lie to Pam, and this is just him being forthright and honest. But like from the outside, it's like, no, this is idiotic. This is a totally crazy thing to do because like you know that she's gonna think you're crazy. Like there's no way that she's gonna just be like, oh, you're psychic. I get it. She's gonna think you're crazy. And in this type of relationship, it's like, okay, you've got adult children, but you're still tied together through these children that you have together. And regardless of the fact that like it's not like you have to be babysitting and changing the diapers of the children, you're still like responsible for those people who are the most important person in the other parent's life. And so for one of them to go crazy, it's extremely worrying. All I'm trying to say here is it would be very worrying to Pam to learn that he had lost his mind, because they are still connected in that way, this very important way that through their children.
Yeah.
And so she can't afford to just disconnect from this guy. It's a kind of an interesting kind of hold that he has on her, actually. And I don't know. It's funny because when I was reading it, I was like, oh, that's kind of bold of him, but I guess it's good that he's being honest. And then kind of after thinking about it later, I was like, why the hell did he tell her that? That's stupid.
Yeah, I mean, basically becomes like the focal conflict of the rest of this chapter, right? Is like, oh no, this is going to spill over onto my daughter and could affect our relationship and could break everything. And
Right.
that becomes, I need to solve this. I need to find a way to solve this, to convince her, as Wireman suggests to him. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both of them leave this conversation, Matt, feeling pretty disappointed. And like, what were they expecting here? Like, I think one interesting thing about this, and this is, I'm building the building blocks of my in defense of Pam argument right now. Like you can tell why she's upset during the course of this call, right? She just got called a see you next Tuesday by Tom, her former lover. You know, she had it's a very traumatic, dramatic confrontation there with a person who, you know, we were led to believe it will work at saving his life, but he was not happy about it and he was mean to her. Um, so that makes sense. But like, why is Edgar disappointed and upset? Like, was he expecting to be thanked here? Like, what was like? I think he says like he ends the call saying no good deed goes unpunished, and I was like, what was like what were you expecting from Pam here? Were you just like, wow, Edgar, you were right. I can't believe you were right. Wow, that's so amazing of you. Thank you, thank you. I just like it just seems kind of ridiculous to me. And I don't think, Matt, it's an accident that we see this conversation right after the conversation with Wireman about his refusal to go to the doctor, that we see the ways in which Edgar reacts to this man being obstinate and refusing to do something, and then the way he gets really mad at Pam for acting this way, while, yes, as you noted, manages to keep hold of that anger. I don't think that's an accident to me. It's just like the way different people trigger you different ways.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, I'm stretching very hard to be accommodating to your point of view here, but I do think that he is being a bit manipulative. I mean, he's admitting that he's being manipulative.
Yeah, yeah,
Now here it's hard to be too upset with him because it's to save a life.
yeah. It's for the
But you
greater good. Yeah, yeah.
but you do understand Pam's feeling manipulated, where, you know, from her point of view, it's like, I mean, yeah, okay, it's to save a life, but this, you get the feeling, if you take her at her word, if you sort of just interpret her as basically being honest about the things that she says, then this is kind of Edgar's MO, is to kind of push people around and get him to do what he wants.
Yes,
And
yes. Thank you for making my points for me.
Yeah. So that comes through here, and it's like, once again, you know, we're nicely ensconced in Edgar's head, so it all seems just like, well, this is how it has to be, Pam. Like, what do you want from me? This is how it has to be. And she certainly doesn't help things by just being incredibly rude.
Certainly,
wherever possible. But yes, you're right that there's that interesting subtext if we kind of look at the situation objectively.
Yeah. I do also really like this bit about how the gloves that Edgar used to draw the photo of, or the picture of Pam, have seemingly disappeared. I think the line in the text is like, and I never saw them again. And it's just like, it's so gothic.
It is so gothic. I agree.
So Matt, I found it challenging to talk about this next particular bit here, because I'm basically pointing out a scene of intentional mystery and going, so what do you think about that? But the next event of our chapter is Edgar going over to watch Elizabeth while Wireman is dealing with some property management business. And Elizabeth demands that Edgar take one of her China dolls, this one with a chipped up face, and pretend to toss it in a pond by the tennis court, which he doesn't actually do. There's just a pile of stones that is, obviously, this is a thing that is repeated over and over again, that he's told to get rid of this particular China doll, but they don't actually do it, and so he tosses a rock in there, and that's the scene. So Matt, what's that about?
Yeah, it's tack. They're Kantas. Don't throw the Kantas in the water. I mean, I 97% joking there, but like, I don't actually think that the little China dolls are possessed, but I do think there's something in the space of possession or some kind of spirit on this island that is, I mean, we get some sort of textual indication that Elizabeth may or may not be partially possessed at times. And, maybe there's some story having to do with possession or at least some kind of, malevolent spirit. And she's sort of reenacting this story with the dolls, like because we see her play with the dolls. The dolls are kind of her externalization of her inner life, you could say.
Yeah, yeah.
And when when her mind is functioning correctly, then she just like plays with them happily and constructs imaginative scenarios. But when it's not functioning correctly, it seems to converge on this repetitive uh, scenario that you just outlined, where one of them is now bad and she has to go toss it in the pond, which could be connected to this idea of someone being drowned in the ocean. So I get you get the sense that there's something connecting all of these ideas.
And we do learn in the how to draw a picture section coming up that the storm that she perhaps summoned discovered some buried treasure for her skin diver father to go look for, and the thing she said is, if you find any China dolls, those are mine. So yeah, there's something about these dolls, whether literally or metaphorically, for her.
Yeah, like we haven't seen a ton of indication that they're literally haunted, but they could be literally haunted. But yeah, they could just be a symbol. Of course. Yeah.
I really like this part as well. So this is Elizabeth kind of frustrated at her deteriorating mind. Fuck, she said. I'm so fucking confused. And then with a spite I would not have guessed she had in her, they all died and left me to this. I was the last one to be repulsed by her lapse into vulgarity. I understood it too well. Maybe the quality of mercy isn't strained, but there are millions of us who live and die by the idea. But we have things like this waiting. Yes. So I love this, Matt, because here's some casual Shakespeare. I don't know if you knew that, but the quality of mercy is not strained is a quote from I believe it's The Merchant of Venice. I'm not 100% sure. This is a very King thing to do, right? He loves Shakespeare. The question I have for you, and kind of the reason I pulled this out, is I'm trying to think. I'm trying to word this in a way that doesn't come off mean, but like Edgar is a contractor turned businessman. And he's not the type of person you would perhaps stereotypically think as someone oft quoting Shakespeare, but he does twice in this week's reading, here and then the bubble reputation that is the name of chapter 10 is another Shakespeare reference. So I guess that's interesting, right? Because I have actually heard a complaint lobbed at King characters sometimes is that they all have like an encyclopedic knowledge of literature, because Stephen King loves books and poems and things like this, even when it might not make sense for the actual character to have that encyclopedic knowledge of literature. Here I find it easy, and I actually think, Matt, this is like a perfect test bed for our whole philosophy that I had in mind while reading this, because we just talked about it on the live show we appeared on Friday, the idea of the author is a genius and everything's intentional. Because you could just look at this and say, I don't think a blue collar worker turned manager would be quoting Shakespeare this much. That doesn't feel realistic to me. That must be a mistake. Or you could look at it and be like, yes, but that's the point, because it is showing how special, unique, and different Edgar Fremantle is from the type of person you would normally expect. That perhaps this is why he's here. This is why he was summoned here, why he was called here.
Yeah.
So that's just fun. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think you're correct to look for and indeed identify some sort of in-text justifications for why this might be the case. I think we've also got this thing throughout the book where Edgar and Wireman will, with some degree of self-consciousness, lob these literary and artistic references at each other. They'll quote things at each other constantly, and then try to guess what year the thing happened in, even though they don't quite know, which is kind of a charming thing between them. And that just, that they're sort of both able to keep up with each other on that intellectual level. and they're sort of kindred spirits, right? They're sort of these like instant friends who just get along super well. And it's like, yeah, well, Wireman's a lawyer, and he's obviously cultured to some degree, and the fact that they're able to kind of go tit for tat like that, I think, does suggest that Fremantle is actually also a bit of a worldly literary type himself, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before we get any angry emails from $1 million construction company owners in our audience, I'm not saying that if you're a contractor you can't like Shakespeare. I'm not saying that at all. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, if you're dealing with archetypes, like, he is the type who you would perhaps expect to not be that kind of super interested in literature and making those kind of quotes all the time. But he certainly is.
Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting the larger question of, like, does King have his characters be unrealistically well read? And I just can never muster up any like problem with this, because it's like, he's always utilizing it in a way that makes sense inside the story, regardless of whether it's realistic. And to me, it's like, it's the same as, like, you read science fiction and, like, every character in the story is like an engineer or a scientist, and even the characters who aren't engineers or scientists know far too much about engineering and science. Yeah, because the author who, the author can't unknow certain things, but also that's an element of just, like, knowing who your audience is and knowing who you're writing to. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I don't see that as a, like, oh, it's bad writing. It's like, no, it's knowing your audience, and it's writing to please your audience to some degree.
I agree. I just to be clear, I don't have any problem with this whatsoever. I just think it is really interesting that, like, it just, to me, what I was thinking about this, like, became the perfect example of how you and I like to approach books, right? Where it's like, I think it's very easy for a person to just look at that and be like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't like it. I think the better, much more interesting and enjoyable idea is, oh, that's different. I wonder if there's purpose behind that. And maybe I could spend some time trying to dig at what that purpose is. Because I do think, like, Edgar is built to be this unique character. Like, his background doesn't match the person we see in the book now. Right now, he's an artist. He's like, we're told he's this demanding, controlling person, but the person we see here is kind, is compassionate, is always thinking about everyone else, is doing whatever he can for them. There are disconnects, and I think they're intentional disconnects between who we're told this person was and the person we're seeing. And I think the idea of being built up in the past as this, very traditional blue collar worker who, like, started at the bottom, rose his way to the top, eventually spread out and started his own company, great, obviously hardworking, talented person, but not, you would think, like, I don't, it feels mean to say this, but not like an intellectual type, but he certainly is that. He certainly is. Yeah. And I think it's just much more interesting to examine that than to just write it off as bad mistake.
For sure. Yeah, no, this is really interesting, and sorry for sort of spiraling in an unexpected direction, but this actually connects back to, like, maybe what we're doing with Pam for me, because Pam is somebody who knew the old Edgar for decades, and she just cannot see that this guy is not the same guy. She just can't, like, it's just not. She looks at him, she sees the guy that she was married to for 30 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting, statement that people, when people change, especially due to something that happens very suddenly, it can be impossible for the people in their lives to acknowledge that ever. It's like, it's just really hard. I don't know that that's what we're doing, but that's definitely in play here.
I don't even need to make my Pam doesn't suck argument now. You're just making it for me. No.
I hate Pam. Let's. I'm still on team Pam sucks. Don't get me wrong.
All right. So, while watching Elizabeth, Edgar suddenly, Matt, gets an itch in his arm. He gets this need to draw, and he does so, drawing a picture of Pam sitting in a rocking chair in her house with a new dog and a new TV and all these things. Wireman had suggested that he do something that proves the existence of his power to Pam, and now Duma Key doth provide. This is the first bit, and I think this is the significance of this, where we mention that the itch is decanted when Edgar draws, that he's pouring this itching feeling he gets in his phantom limb out onto the page as he draws. I think it wouldn't be a King book without some sort of addiction metaphor, so I think it's worth exploring this briefly, right? Like, I think the word choice decanted there, I think, was very significant.
Yes. Sorry, are you saying panned? Did you say panned?
Did I say panned?
I don't. I heard you say panned, and then the bit from Step Brothers jumped into my head, and I couldn't go on without mentioning that. Are you saying panned? Everybody go watch that bit from Step Brothers and then come back. Yes, decanted, the idea of the itch being decanted, the idea of there being, some eldritch force that's building up in his, maybe like, sort of, ectoplasmically accumulating in his phantom limb, and then it has to be poured out. I also think it's really interesting that it's an itch, right? We never quite talked about this explicitly or specifically, that it's an itch. He feels an itch, and he has to get rid of the itch. And we often use the itch metaphorically. We say somebody's got the itch to do something, and it's like, what we mean is there's like a almost unignorable, uncontrollable compulsion, and like you just have to deal with it. And King makes it literally. He makes it literally a felt powerful itch that Edgar just, almost can't resist acting on.
Yeah. And I mean, that lines up with the itch to drink, the itch to do drugs, like all these addictions that people suffer from. Like, it's right there. It's right there.
Yep.
All right. So Edgar calls up Pam to prove to her that he has superpowers. He relays the information to her that he just drew a picture of her. She's currently sitting in a chair, or was this new chair. She got a new TV. She's got a new cat. He relays all this information to her, and it freaks her the fuck out. And we get this: stop spying on me. If you ever loved me, stop spying on me. Then stop blaming me, I said in a hoarse, not quite breaking voice. Suddenly I remembered Ilsa getting ready to go back to Brown. Ilsa standing on the strong tropical sun outside the Delta terminal, looking up at me and saying, "You deserve to get better." Sometimes I wonder if you really believe that. What's happened to me isn't my fault. The accident wasn't my fault, and neither is this. I didn't ask for it. She screamed, "Do you think I did?" I closed my eyes, begging something, anything to keep me from giving back anger for anger. No, of course not. Then leave me out of it. Stop calling me. Stop scaring me. All right, here we go, Matt. Pam sucks. Yes, she's a jerk. She says mean things to people, to her children. However, I want to play a game with you real quick. Let's just play. Let's paint a picture, Matt. Let's paint a picture of Pam's life, because from the data we're given, this is a woman who marries a man who his entire life has been about his career, right? Like, I think that's pretty clear, right? Like, he started off at an entry level position in this construction company, basically, grunt work. He builds himself up, then he goes off, starts his own company. He takes this beginning company, builds it up to a multi-million-dollar company, and all the while, what's for Pam? Pam is what do we know about Pam, Matt? Like, she raised the kids, right? Like, does she have a career? Does she have a job? Maybe. I don't think so. And then he gets in an accident, and so suddenly her whole life, it's been all about Edgar, and now she finds herself in a place where, I'm going to have to take care of Edgar. So he's hurt now. It's all about Edgar still. It's always about Edgar. And then he starts scaring the shit out of her by being pissed off at her all the time and choking her. And it's like, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't deal with this. I have to get away from it. And so she does. She says she's leaving him. She leaves him. It's not a great thing to do, but I'm not trying to argue that Pam isn't an asshole. I'm just trying to show her perspective here. Then he keeps calling her on the phone all the time. Do this. I know about your affair. I'm going to confront you about your affair, and I'm going to force you to do something. And then I'm going to call you to convince you. You get out of her life, man. Just like, you can't be in her life anymore. Like, this is what divorce means. Like, I can totally see the exhaustion and the fear and the anger from her. It's just like, just leave me alone. Like, this whole thing is still painful for me, and I don't want to deal with it anymore.
Sorry, I was getting some water. No, just kidding. Okay.
God
so yeah, so that was very good. That was very good. And I think you have gotten me to consider, over the course of this whole conversation, you've gotten me to look at things as they appear from her side. And from her side, Edgar does appear super crazy. Not just because he admitted that he saw a hallucination of a ghost man, but even the idea of like calling up your ex and being like, I know that you're like having affairs with multiple men. And
so, for the record, not technically affairs, right?
But,
like,
right. Just affairs in the sort of
not
French sense of the word, right? And like, she is rightly like, none of your fucking business. I can sleep with whoever I want, and why are you even talking to me about this? And then he's like, well, one of them's gonna kill himself. And she's like, you're crazy. That's a crazy thing to say. Imagine one of your ex-lovers called you up and was like, I know what you've been doing, and one of the people you're sleeping with is going to kill themselves. You'd just be like, I'm calling the police.
Go the fuck away. Go away. I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah. Like the only reason, I mean, that's kind of partly why I brought up the thing about them sharing kids earlier, is if they didn't share kids, she would be totally within her rights to just hang up on him and just be like, I'm not fucking talking to that guy. I got nothing to say to that guy. But you kind of have to maintain some level of appearances when it comes to exes that have children together.
Sure. Yeah.
So she is caught in this bind, and because we're in his head, it always seems so reasonable. It's like, well,
because we know he's right. Like, we know Tom is going to kill himself. We know he does have this power. We know, he is genuinely looking out for the best interest of everyone involved. Like, we know this, but she doesn't know this.
Yeah, you're right about all of that. And I'm not even. This isn't even a yes, but it's just isn't it also interesting that King characterizes her as being so incredibly unpleasant?
Yeah. Yes.
Because
and to be clear here, like, I'm not saying, like, I don't think there's a binary here. I don't think it's like either Pam sucks or Edgar sucks. They can't both suck in different ways. I just think to me, she would be a much more boring character if she is just almost cartoonishly shitty, which is kind of the Pam that we've seen up until this point, is that she is just kind of cartoonishly a shitty person across the board. Like, last week especially, it's just like, oh my God, woman, like, can you say anything that's not mean or rude, like, to anyone? And the answer at the time was no. But I do think, like, as we go along, we do see more complexities of her, and I love that. Like, I think Edgar leaves this conversation like being like, I deserve this. I think that's the most interesting part of it. It is like, she sucks, no argument here, but he really beats himself up about a lot of the stuff involving Pam, like really does. And that's another method for King to make you empathize with him, that like, even when she's being awful to him, he's kind of just like, yeah, but I probably deserve this. And I think that's another interesting wrinkle in it too.
Yeah. I've sort of shifted slightly from seeing it as this like enormous mystery of like, what was Edgar is a different person? It's like, no, yeah, he was much more of an asshole. Mm-hmm. It's not really a mystery. It's just, the only mystery is like, why did he change so much? And it's like, well, that's not really a mystery either. He changed so much because he had a extremely traumatic near-death experience. So
yeah,
it's just that King has been sort of painting this picture through, implication, right?
Yeah.
And we filled in the gaps as we go.
I really liked what you said about the idea that, like, she can't see the changed person. And it's
Mhm.
like, because that must be really hard. Like Edgar can feel the changes inside him. He can, like, the connections his brain is making, the things that he's thinking and wanting to do, like, he can feel that change. But that's a really hard thing to communicate to other people. Like, is like, you just walk up to someone like, I'm changed now, look. It's like, okay, but remember that one time that you strangled me? Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't feel changed. And so, yeah, that's a really hard thing for another person to just accept, is that, no, I promise I'm a different person now. And it's great because we have these characters of Elizabeth and Wireman to demonstrate that to us, to show us, the reader, that yes, like, look, we have this difference of, we have these people that knew him in his old life versus these people that know him here in this new life, and look how different they feel about him, look how different they're reacting to his behavior. And Ilsa, I think, is the kind of the thing caught in the middle of all this, and in a really interesting way, because, like, he doesn't have a very good relationship with his older daughter, and to the point where maybe you can speculate, oh well, when they first started having children, Edgar was still no nonsense, the business is my life, and really was a completely absent parent for a lot of his eldest's, like, pivotal moments of her life. But, like, the business grew and was more successful, and maybe as Ilsa got older, he had a little bit more time, and so therefore spent a little bit more time with her. And then the eldest gets resentful of that, and it spirals from there. You could see all these none of these things have been explicitly stated by the book, but you can see them in the background of the painting. We're going to keep using painting metaphors because why not?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. I think that's, sort of why else have the two daughters, and why have them behave
Mhm.
differently in that way. I
Yeah.
agree with you that it's just fascinating how much of this I, I like the painting metaphor. I like the idea of the background, because the foreground is all the stuff that's happening on Duma Key, but there is a lot of stuff happening in the background that we're meant to
Yeah.
sort of piece together for ourselves.
Yep. Yep. So, shaken from his conversation with the wonderful and perfect Pam Fremantle, Edgar goes wandering around Elizabeth's house, ends up on the second floor where he finds a massive family portrait of her entire family. So we get to see the whole of the Eastlake family, as it was in the 1920s, I think.
Yeah. I was kind of tickled by the fact that King points out in the text through Edgar that, like, there's no way a photograph this old could be this big, and have this level of resolution, but this was the special camera. This was a one of a kind camera that really existed. I assume, and therefore this picture can exist. And I mean, one reason why I'm more than willing to extend the benefit of the doubt about this picture is that this is a book that's so concerned with the visual arts,
Hmm. Hmm.
that King going out of his way to get this detail right about this weird exotic camera from 100 years ago, sounds totally appropriate.
Yeah, it's great because, like, on you could just say, well, why wasn't it just a painting? Like, so they
Hmm.
sat for a painting, but it's not like it's an action shot, right? Like, the thing is that Elizabeth is, like, being held by her father in one hand, and kind of reaching for the camera, and, like, it's this very active, and the active, young, excited version of her is being contrasted with the elderly, at the end of her life version of her.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I wonder if this is, like, just like an editor's note of, like, hey, I don't think a camera back then could make a photo that big. No, no, no. It could. I googled this.
Yeah,
There's a special camera,
yeah.
and they had it.
And it was on Duma Key for some reason. I mean, it's fine because this guy's supposed to be rich anyway, right? So
Yeah, you could totally afford a super special camera, or at least
yeah,
a super special cameraman to come out to his house and snap a picture of his family.
exactly.
All right, so we move on to our next chapter, which is how to draw a picture 5. The opening lines of this one, Matt: don't be afraid to experiment. Find your muse and let her lead you. That's once again great, but ominous. This little chapter here, I think, is meant to introduce us to the truth of the power that both little Libet and Edgar Fremantle have been dabbling in. It's not just, Matt, that they're able to see the present or the future through their art, but perhaps they're also able to influence it. Elizabeth draws a splattered cake, and then a cake gets splattered. And maybe, Matt, we could chalk that up to just prediction, right? She just saw that the cake was going to be splattered, but maybe it's the Matrix, where if she hadn't seen the cake splattered, maybe it would have the glass. You remember the glass? You know the Matrix.
Of
Um,
course, yeah.
and I think the text wants to make this clear, right? Because what does she do next? Well, she summons a hurricane, a specific off-season hurricane that's called an Alice, which, by the way, not a thing. There's not, like, that's not a term that people use for off-season hurricanes. It's King just made it up, I'm pretty sure.
um, I speaking of details, I just assumed were well researched. Oh man, that's hilarious.
So I went looking for this because I was curious if that was a real thing, and no, it's not. And then in the afterthoughts of this book, by the way, he says, "And no one in Florida calls out of season storms Alice's except me." So that is
That's
just literally a Kingism.
uh,
That yeah,
oh my god.
that's perfect. Yeah.
On this level of the tower, they do. Yeah.
But yeah, so this off-season hurricane is summoned by Elizabeth. Her dad is upset, and she wants to bring him some new treasures to go skin diving for, and so she summons this hurricane. So man, we're seeing the power that Edgar has been messing with uh, escalate in power, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and also kind of feels like the idea to draw the hurricane isn't quite her idea.
Mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm.
maybe there's something else driving her to do this, using her own sort of shine as a tool for its own ends.
Yeah.
That certainly wouldn't be the first time that's happened in a King story.
No, and again, we've been led so many times throughout these moments to make comparisons between what is happening in the past with little Elizabeth to what is happening in the present with Edgar right now, that we can be like, uh-oh, right? Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
and we perhaps can start asking questions right now where it's like, okay, so we know she has the power to influence things. We know her two sisters mysteriously disappeared, assumed drowned, and that she didn't like them very much, right?
Right.
And then maybe we're starting to extend that out to Edgar and go, uh-oh, so was Edgar predicting his daughter's breakup with her fiance or making it happen? I don't know. But I think these are questions they're starting to ping off in our head a little bit, right?
Yeah, they are. And I don't think we can say yet at this point. We have, or rather, we're going to see in the next bit that Edgar can manifest things that he wants to happen.
Yeah.
He can make things
Mhm.
happen. But he does also just seem to have the second sight. Like he can see what's going on in
Yeah.
Pam's living room. He could see that his friend was going to kill himself. Those both very much just seemed like a kind of clairvoyance. So those feel like two different things. So it is interesting to consider. Like maybe they're not. Maybe he
Yeah.
maybe he made those things happen. I don't know. I think it can. I think it can work both ways. But yeah, we're meant to worry about the idea that, well, maybe he'll make something happen that he didn't intend to
Yeah,
happen.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And our chapter ends with this. Libet, tell me where this fabulous treasure lies. Libet says, I will, but do you promise I can have the China dolly? Daddy says, any doll is yours, fair salvage. The muse saw it, and the girl painted it, so their future is set. This is the part that makes me actually think what we were talking about, is that this idea that, you see something, you paint it, and therefore it influences the future. Now it's going to happen, right? Like like even if you're right, even if this is just him having some sort of extrasensory perception and seeing these things. Once he takes this and puts it down, it sets it. Now it's set in the canvas.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Right. And he seems to, as we kind of mentioned before, he feels this itch. So it's like maybe he sees something and he doesn't want it to happen, but he can't stop himself because
Mm-hmm.
the power of that itch is so strong that's
Yep,
something I could imagine happening.
definitely. Yep. All right, let's move on to chapter 9, titled Candy Brown. This chapter opens with Edgar painting Girl with Ship for the first time, but not the last. And we get this wonderful paragraph. The ship paintings were good, maybe great. They certainly felt that way when I finished them. They were also bad, powerful medicine. I think I knew from that first one, executed during the small hours of Valentine's Day, during the last night of Tina Garibaldi's life. That's a rough little opening bit there, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a disorienting. I don't know if cold open is quite the right word when it's the middle of a book, but you're like, what's going on? Who?
Yeah, yeah.
Valentine's Day, huh? Yeah, but I mean, it unspools, but I think it continues to be disorienting is the interesting thing, because these elements keep popping up in ways where you're like, what? And I think it speaks to kind of his mental preoccupation with this event that happened.
Yeah, definitely. But the painting though, Girl with Ship, starts from a dream, a powerful dream that Edgar, really can't shake. He sees what looks like possibly his daughter, possibly just his Raggedy Ann doll sitting out there in a rowboat looking at a ship. He channels this dream into a painting, and we're kind of told that his experience here is that this is the thing that he's perhaps been searching to paint the whole time. That every sunset painting that a thing is put in the sunset, he was looking for the ship, and that's ominous.
Yeah, I really want to know what's going on with this ship. This is the mystery.
So then, Matt, we learn the story of Candy Brown, rapist and murderer, and Tina Garibaldi, his victim. And this is a tough read. But look how King writes. I'm really fascinated by this. Look how King writes this. The Baumgartens departed. The Godfrey's dog barked them goodbye. A merry maid's crew went into the house where the Baumgartens had been staying and gave it a good cleaning. The Godfrey's dog barked hello and goodbye. Tina Garibaldi's body was found in a ditch behind the Wilk Park Little League field, naked from the waist down, discarded like a bag of garbage. Her mother was shown on Channel 6 screaming and harrowing at her cheeks. The Kinters replaced the Baumgartens. The folks from Toledo vacated 39, and 3 pleasant old ladies from Michigan moved in. The old ladies laughed a lot and actually said yoo-hoo when they saw me or Wireman coming. I have no idea if they put the newly installed Wi-Fi at number 39 to use or not, but the first time I played Scrabble with them, they fed me my lunch. The Godfrey's dog barked tirelessly when the old ladies went on their afternoon walks. A man who worked at the Sarasota Easy Jet Wash called the police and said the guy on the Tina Garibaldi tape looked very much like one of his fellow car washers, a guy named George Brown, known to everyone as Candy. And this goes on like this, Matt. Like for 3 pages, it's one long paragraph of us switching back and forth between the mundane happenings of Duma Key, Edgar painting his painting, with the most horrific shit imaginable just tossed in sentences between there, and everything moving forward with the case of Candy Brown and his horrible murder of this girl. It's so incredibly disturbing and effective. I think like I was just like, when King does this every so often, right, where he'll just kind of throw a gauntlet down and be like, I'm gonna do something, and he just writes pages long single paragraphs that like you can tell, oh, he's being serious for a moment, like let's go.
Yeah and it's stylistically kind of bold to do that too, like you said, this strange paragraph structure. He's pulling you into this unusual thing that he's doing and getting you on his wavelength. It's very interesting. The effect of it is very powerful.
Yeah.
And this we're being pulled into the same frequency as Edgar, where this horrible background element of this ongoing, unfolding news story is being woven into the texture of his life, where and you can feel that this is never far from his thoughts, even when you get the sense, even when he's playing Scrabble with these old ladies and maybe they're all laughing together, but he's in the back of his mind, he's wondering where are we at in the Tina Garibaldi case. And anybody can get upset by the idea of a young girl getting murdered, but I feel like him being a father of girls makes maybe this is a thing that pushes his buttons even more than average, and it's just really preying on him, and it's unclear to what degree he's even aware that it's preying on him, but I think he's, not only is he bothered by it, but I think he knows he's bothered by it. Like I think he's just really upset by this, and he's trying to live his life, but he's upset by it.
Yeah, I mean that is exactly what I was going to say. It's wonderful by constructing this paragraph like this. It shows his obsession with it. It shows how he can't escape from it. That it's mixed in his life like this. And I think he's kind of. While I agree with you, like he's acknowledging he's upset with it. I do think he's not acknowledging the level to which it's upsetting him,
Hmm.
because it is stuff like this where it's just he's kind of just relaying the facts, but the way King presents and structures his paragraph, the facts are like coming in between beats of his life. That like he can't come right out and say I was obsessed with this and it was really fucking with my head. He has to say it this way, and I think that it gets that point across beautifully.
Yeah.
But it's just I think it's so good. Like I was absolutely blown away by this.
Yeah, I agree.
So Matt, as he paints girl with ship and gets further on into the series, the ship begins to turn a little bit, and he can start to read the name of the ship. And he says actually that he's going to continue this series until he finds out what this damn ship's name is. So far, all we've seen is PER. So curious if you had any guesses here.
I thought about it for a minute, and all I could come up with is Persephone as a name,
As
which
like that's the Hades lady, right?
Hades, yeah, which has some possible thematic resonance with the idea that it's the girl has to spend half the year in the underworld, but then she's
Mm-hmm.
actually the goddess of spring, um, and there's this so there, in other words, there's this connection between basically an innocent girl who is tied to the underworld in this way.
Mm-hmm.
So it might not be Persephone at all, but if it is Persephone, then I can see a thematic connection.
That's cool. I like that. Yeah. At the end of this whole thing, though, we learn that Wireman has woken up blind in his left eye and is finally going to go to the doctor. Edgar decides to take him, and on the way back from the doctor, Matt, we finally get the full Wireman story. You were right, of course, that he shot himself in the head and somehow survived, but you were wrong about why, Matt. It wasn't some nefarious bad men punishing him for his deeds. It was just dumb luck. The lottery, as Wireman tells it.
Yeah, just this series of improbably bad events in conjunction, just almost unbelievable.
Yeah, it's awful, right? Like this is a part of the book that really really messed me up.
Hmm.
And I think this is something King writes about a lot, and I think this is a reflection of his accident, but also just the way life plays out. That sometimes things just happen, and they could happen at any moment. Like in this, for Wireman, what happens is his daughter chokes to death on a marble, and his wife, on the way to the hospital to see her because she was still alive, dies in a car crash. And then that's it. One day, 10 minutes, both everything in your life that you loved is just gone.
Yeah,
And just horrifying.
yeah. I mean, let's just emphasize the sort of bad luck element of it, though, for a second, because
Yeah.
it would be one thing if it were. I mean, it would be in some ways equally horrible if it was just like he was driving. His wife was driving his daughter to school, and they were T-boned, and they both died. Like, okay, that would be horrible. Obviously, that would
Mm-hmm.
be enough to break anybody. But it was like two separate horrible acts of bad luck. That's
Yeah.
almost it's like it's not just horrible. It's like insane. It's like the universe hates me. Like God hates me, and for some reason that makes it. I don't know. It makes it more like understandable that a person would just like mentally crack in response to that kind of
Oh yeah.
bizarre occurrence.
Yeah, bizarre and almost insanely cruel,
Yeah.
to use the word from our last book.
Right.
I agree, and the thing that fascinates me about this is like King writes about the things that scare him, and it is absolutely true that throughout his career, like I think the thing that scares Stephen King the most is the idea of losing his family, the idea of
Hmm.
losing his children, the idea of losing his wife. Like these things scare him, and I think like a lot of the post car crash stuff was like, oh my god, they almost lost me, and this kind of examination of these ideas and just like how fickle and fast everything can change. And it's not as if he didn't write about that before his accident, right? Like the thing that popped into my head is a 1998 book he wrote called Bag of Bones I was thinking about this week, in which, and this isn't a spoiler because it's like the inciting incident of the novel. The main character is a writer, and his wife is just his pregnant wife is just driving her car and then has a brain aneurysm and dies. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
And like, just the idea of life being so fragile, and just these random events can change everything, is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. Like my wife knows someone that she worked with for years whose husband went out for a run, and had a brain aneurysm while running and died. And so like literally every time I go for a run, there's something in the back of my wife's mind that's like, I hope he's gonna be okay. And like, who knows, right? Like, it's,
Yeah.
everything is just so, it's, and that is, the idea of that is absolutely terrifying. And you can tell it scares the shit out of King because he writes about it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Ugh, awful.
Yeah.
So Wireman goes on to explain his suicide attempt. I love the quote, "In Adam's fall, sinned we all," when he takes the apple. I thought that was just wonderful.
Yeah.
And he also explains his miraculous survival. And I don't think it's the way probably either of us thought it would be. He just like woke up and was like, "Oh, I'm alive. Okay, guess I'll go to work."
No, it was absurd, right? No, it's great actually. The vignette of him, describing the people at work just having no idea what to do with him and how to deal with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really fascinating.
Yeah, we learned that the bullet is still in Wireman's brain and is slowly, ever so slowly moving deeper and deeper. And so he's getting worse and worse, hence the inability to read, hence the new blindness, and his kind of ticking clock, right? Like eventually this will kill him, and there's really nothing anyone can do about it. Well, that's almost no one.
That's why Edgar has to make the arc reactor and put it next to his head.
So it's going to do it. So while they're talking about this, they talk about redness. And I wanted to talk to you about this map to revisit our wonderful conversation and your ongoing metaphor of the colors in King books.
I do love the colors.
Yeah, so Wireman says, "You often have a redness about you, muchacho. I don't think it's an aura exactly, and it's not exactly a thought, except when it is. I've gotten it from you as a word as well as a color on 3 or 4 occasions. And yes, once when I was off Duma Key, when we were at the Skoto." So yeah, this is, red is a trigger for Edgar, right? It is a word, and now we've said it's an aura that kind of surrounds him, and redness is clearly a theme in this novel. He painted the woman in the red robe, or I don't remember what it was, having to do with Ilsa and her boyfriend. The girl in the painting has red hair. Like, red exists in this novel as a unique thing, and so does pink, right? We have big pink, we have little pink. These colors exist in this story. So I thought it'd be fun to at least revisit your idea about what these colors represent and mean in these stories.
Well, it's interesting. This is one of the rare times when I don't feel like it lines up with the typical symbolic meaning, because the meaning is usually pretty consistent. The meaning is usually, red is something like, mature, healthy love, and pink is like sexual, animalistic love, or just lust rather. And these the color symbols can be broader than that, where it speaks more about just like high sort of human emotion versus low sort of animal emotion. But in this case, I'm just not seeing the connections to those meanings, because it's like red here almost seems tied to like anger, and the doll is an anger doll. He sees red when he's angry. He has this film of red over his eye, and then big pink and little pink, like these are, it's a house where he works and he does his art, but there's nothing low or animalistic or sexual at all about any of that. And And so this is like, I think literally the first time in all of these books where I'm just like, huh. I mean, clearly we have both of the colors being foregrounded. Wireman bringing it up to us in text, pointing it out to us, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm more unsure than I've ever been as to what we're doing with these colors exactly.
Yeah, and maybe that is a thing that won't be revealed to us until the end, or maybe it's just, he liked the color red, and actually, the big pink. I think there was a post on our subreddit just today, actually, that um there is a real story that is kind of the basis of this book,
Hmm.
about an artist that lived in Florida, that whose house was called, uh, a pink house called the Artist's House.
Huh.
So it's a Florida artist who had Robert the doll, that took on a haunted doll that an artist used, that stayed in Key West, and lived in a pink house. So like that, I think maybe is just the reason for the pink is
Uh,
related to that. But who knows, right? Um, I think
yeah.
it's just fun to revisit these ideas and see, and maybe it's just as simple as, yes, we like to play with these colors and as symbols, and that doesn't mean that in every story we play with them they have to mean the exact same thing. I don't know.
No, it certainly doesn't. It certainly doesn't. And I maybe sometimes I sound like I think they have to, and they
Hmm.
absolutely don't. Although it is interesting that it's
It's
the same two colors, right?
Yeah, yeah. He
um,
dabbles in those colors quite a bit for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm. So we learn that Wireman's injuries causes strange behavior that gets him fired from his job. I love that his company called them unfortunate family reversals. I love that phrase. That's so awful. Like, Jesus. Just
Reversals. Yeah.
Yeah, just some really great detail here.
Well, they are lawyers, so they do have a way with words.
And this paragraph here I think is really great. Do I regret what I did? Sometimes C, sometimes no. When it's C, I remind myself I wasn't the same man then that I am now, and that I have to cut the old me some slack. That man was so hurt and lost, he really wasn't responsible. This was my other life. This is my other life, and I try to look at my problems in it as, well, birth defects. This of course applies to our boy Edgar as well, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And perhaps to Steve himself.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine that escaped his notice.
Hmm.
And I think this is a good attitude to have about these things that befall us in life. Like, don't just sit around feeling sorry for yourself. Find some kind of acceptance, even if you have
Yeah,
to view it in this rather complicated way.
yeah, yeah. So after this horrible reveal here, Edgar drives Wireman back home, and I wanted to talk about this part for a bit. The text makes it clear here, as Edgar talks about this moment that Elizabeth and Wireman are reunited that February night, and he kind of sees the deep love and respect between these two people. That it is one of the clearest memories he has of his time on Duma Key, and he says in the beginning part of that paragraph, this is about memory. This being this story. This story is about memory. And that's true, of course. We've had lots of talks, like both literally and metaphorically, about memory and the struggles of remembering that both young Elizabeth um and Edgar suffered after their accidents. But like, I don't know, like memory hasn't necessarily been the focal point of the story so far. I'm just wondering what, like, your take at the book kind of coming right out and saying this is the theme is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a background element, the idea that he had brain damage and he has trouble remembering words.
Hmm.
Um, but for him, it's mostly about remembering words, right? It's not about like,
Yeah.
oh, I forgot my whole, I did think there was, so we talked about this more previous weeks, the idea where it's like, there's this massive communication disconnect between him and Pam. And one plausible explanation for that is like he has just forgotten much of the way his life was before.
Hmm.
And then that could be the answer to the mystery. So maybe it is like maybe he's forgotten something. Like maybe this is about memory. Maybe there is some important element of memory that we're still not really privy to because the story still hasn't rolled it out to us. And then, of course, for Elizabeth, I think it does have a lot to do with memory because even though she's not like the central character, we see that, she's kind of in and out of having access to her memories.
Yeah. No, I agree. Just thought the text makes it so clear in this moment that I thought we had to at least touch on it.
Sure.
So Edgar gets home, calls the gallery saying he'd be interested in doing a show after all, and then flips on the TV to see Candy Brown's lawyer argue not guilty by reason of insanity. It's not Candy Brown's fault, Matt. It's the government's fault.
Yeah.
Fucking infuriating.
I feel the same way about my problems. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you relate to.
It's the government's fault, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, I gotcha. Yeah. Everything really is the government's fault, I think.
Exactly.
So just then, Edgar's arm starts to itch like crazy, and he finds himself needing to paint a picture of Candy Brown kidnapping Tina. I love this. I heard myself yelling at it to stop. Please stop. But of course, there was only one way to stop it. So he's not really in control anymore, right?
Yeah, I think this is maybe in the back of my mind as we were having this conversation up to this point was sometimes things, his muse sort of takes over, and it is, I think, literally supernatural, right? It's his arm is doing it. He's not even doing it. His itch is doing it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those moments where it's like, well, it's not like we kind of agree with him that this guy needs to die, so that's okay. But it is worrying that he is losing control over his abilities like this.
Yeah, I mean, when turned towards good, his death paintings can be helpful. But what happens when the muse wants someone else to die that maybe we don't? It's terrifying, and it is like obviously there's a clear connection here to the way King talks about writing, right? That sometimes writing is this process, and he almost literalizes this in The Dark Tower, where he hears the song of the turtle and he just writes down what he hears, and he's not in control of this. It's just coming out of him. And there's something magical and wonderful about that, but there's something scary about that too. Like that this is like, where is this stuff coming from? I don't know. I don't even feel like it's coming from me when I'm writing it down on paper. And that's what he's doing with this he's literalizing that with this creation of art. And yeah, it's scary.
Exactly. Yep.
So Edgar finishes his painting, eats a entire mixing bowl full of cereal, which of course is what we both do after podcasting. The act of creation. It's very, very tiring, Matt. And
it's exhausting.
Podcast, and we just got to eat some raw meat or a whole bowl of cereal. One of those two things. That's it. Yeah.
I think I'm out of cereal, so I guess it's raw hamburger meat for me tonight.
All right, some 2 a.m. raw meat. Let's go.
Yep.
He goes to bed knowing he's done something terrible. And sure enough, he wakes up the next morning to find that Candy Brown has mysteriously died in his sleep, and that his painting showed him without a mouth and a nose. So he erased him.
He erased him from existence.
It's sad that I know. I know that reference perfectly.
Yeah, well, you served it up to me, so
does everyone know? Everyone
knows that we're referencing Back to the Future, of course.
I hope so. Yeah. So yeah, he killed Candy Brown. No big loss.
Yeah, can't feel too bad about this.
Nope. But that moves us on to chapter 10, the bubble reputation. Here's our second Shakespeare reference of the week, Matt. This is from As You Like It. I think Shakespeare refers to reputation as a bubble, meaning it can grow and grow, but at any time it could pop. And there you go.
We had bubbles back then?
Yes. What do you mean they had bubbles back then? They had soap. Huh. They just didn't use it very much.
You just never think about that. You just never think about there being bubbles.
Yeah, just like there's just bubbles everywhere, man. Everyone's blowing bubbles all the time.
You just think of bubbles as being kind of a new thing, is all.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So that morning, Edgar trundles over to Elizabeth to celebrate the death of Candy Brown with her and Wireman. I like Matt. What the book does here is like it doesn't leave any room for doubt. Like Edgar has absolutely no doubt that he is the one responsible for Candy Brown's death. There's no attempt to explain it away or not take credit for it. He just says right out here, I had stopped his breath. And we see here that the kind of one of the first things he does is decide to keep this a secret from Wireman, which you know, it's not quartet rules say you have to tell your quartet everything. So it's not good that he decides at first to keep a secret from him.
Yeah, no, definitely. Uh, I agree. I mean, he does eventually tell him, though, doesn't
Yes,
he?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, see, you know, I mean, I think it's interesting. You're right. I think it speaks to the level of like distress that he feels here, that he keeps it from him at
Mhm.
all, because they've been building such a close rapport.
He's
Um,
been nothing but honest with him the entire time so far,
yeah,
and this is like the
yeah,
first time he chooses not to be. And you're right, like it's okay because he eventually comes clean, and there's even logic behind the reason to keep this from him is because he has this plan to help Wireman, and he doesn't want to reveal it all until he's sure it will work in some way.
that's true.
But still,
Yeah, yeah,
um, so we get this then, and I wanted to talk about this briefly. I thought we made quite the trio: the senile woman, the ex-lawyer with the slug in his brain, and the amputee ex-contractor, all with battle scars on the right side of our heads. I think we gestured at like the relatable nature of these three characters, but it's good that the text just kind of comes right out and says it here, right? It's like not only are we all damaged, but we're all damaged in the same place. The Contra like is the same thing for all three of us, right? That's why Wireman's left eye is the one he's blind in, even though he shot himself on the right side of his head. And I think what this does is start to do something that I think King hits pretty hard in this chapter is were all these people summoned here? Did Edgar pick this place because he wanted to or because he was made to? Same with Wireman, right? Did he find this job because he wanted to or because he was made to find this job? Hell, same with Elizabeth. Hell, same did their accidents happen by accident or was this part of something greater, some force pushing and pulling them towards all coming together at this moment?
yeah. Um, I do think the text is urging us to ask these questions.
Mhm.
To me, this is in the same ongoing conversation that we have, where there's this strain of Calvinism that crops up in King's universe sometimes, where you know people are predestined to certain fates, or just fate, you can say more broadly,
Yeah.
in the form of Ka often. Um, but I think the way I have come to interpret these things, especially the way that these scenarios has been described, is I'm really seeing this as a perfect implementation of the purpose versus the random concept.
Hmm.
And maybe I say this because we just finished the back to back regulators and desperation, where those ideas were central. But it's like maybe the accidents were random, but the purpose puts the outcome of that accident to some purpose. And in effect, it all kind of gets woven into the plan of the purpose, even if it was something just chaotically happening. It's like everything ends up serving the purpose. Everything serves the beam, regardless of whether the random is trying to just, fuck somebody's day up.
Mm. Mhm.
And the wheel of Ka turns regardless. And so it's like there's kind of no answer to the question. It's like bad things happen to good people, and then the greater forces of the universe put those people to some productive use. That's the way I'm seeing it right now. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe the book will be explicit and kind of tell us the answer to these questions, but that's what I'm thinking right now.
sure. I like that. I think it allows all these different elements to kind of align in a way that's satisfying. Um, I like that. I like that.
Cool.
So Wireman is preparing for his death, or at least the forced retirement from his job, and this kind of spurs Edgar on to test his new Candy Brown killing talent. He snatches an X-ray of Wireman's brain and takes it home to paint. The plan is to paint the brain without the slug in it and see if it fixes old Wireman. Matt, were you able to find any significance to the fact that the canvas for this particular drawing ends up being not a canvas at all, but instead a cardboard insert they put on the inside of nice button-down dress t-shirts, or not shirt t-shirt shirts.
I mean, like sort of like artistically, it's kind of a fun visual way of saying, we're looking inside or behind the surface of the thing that we're looking at to something beyond it.
I like
by,
that.
by by having this cardboard inset into the canvas, but like why the cardboard that comes from shirts? It's like, I think that's just what he had around. I don't see any deep meaning to that personally. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like what you said there. That's kind of what my guess was as well. I think it's also just fun that, like, this idea that, and again, shows how out of control this thing is for Edgar, that it's like, I need to find the right canvas. There's always something different and it's just so random in this. It's like he just goes into his closet and tears open these new shirts he's got, and for a second there you're like, what shirts? And then he pulls out the little cardboard insert and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Right. There's something that feels very like, oh, he's a real artist, where he's like, I must have exactly the right medium. I must, he knows what he needs. He knows
Yeah.
exactly what it is and how it's going to work, and he sees it all in his mind. And if
Mhm.
somebody asked him to explain his process, he would be like, I don't know. I just knew that was the right answer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like you were saying, the way King responds and people ask him where his ideas come from, he's like, that's
Totally.
not
Totally.
how that works.
It's not, but it makes for a very romantic gothic answer, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Speaking of gothic, what I was doing didn't work just because it played on the nerve endings. It worked because people knew. On some level, they really did know that what they were looking at had come from a place beyond talent. The feeling those Doom pictures conveyed was horror, barely held in check, horror waiting to happen, inbound on rotted sales. That's so good, man. It's so good.
Yeah. I love it. I love this stuff.
So after he finishes the drawing, Wireman calls him up and says his headache, the headache that he's had every day since he shot himself in the head, is completely gone. He still can't see out of his left eye, though, and Edgar decides this means it's going to take a lot more work to restore Wireman to full working order. He has to paint a giant portrait of him. I love, once again, Matt, I'm going to reiterate this, that he and Wireman are playing in this world beyond explanation. Wireman immediately knows Edgar is responsible for this change, and Edgar doesn't try to hide it. And there's no discussions about is this really happening. They're just both like, "Yep, okay," and then we just move on.
Right. Yeah. It helps that you've got these two characters with the shine, and
Yeah,
I really
true.
like
Yeah.
I like their dynamic a lot. Actually, I've come to more and more see the idea of Katet and the idea of the shine specifically
Mm-hmm.
as just a metaphor for having people who just really get you, and like you don't need why use a whole sentence when a word or a gesture can do. Like there's people in life that just get you that well. It's like, that's your Katet. That's kind of what the shine is. It's in real life, it's not literally telepathy, but it's almost functionally telepathy when there's somebody who just really clicks with you. And that's what I enjoy about their relationship.
Yeah, I love that. I think we talked about when we had the Katet, and their kind of the power that a Katet gives you to understand each other is almost that kind of literal representation of just when you have a close net group of people, the ability to kind of understand each other on a level that almost feels magical. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so begins Wireman Looks West, a painting Edgar will work on over the next several days and across basically the rest of this chapter. Here we go, Matt. Here we go.
So I've been thinking off and on about the practicalities of painting. I don't know jack about painting, so let's just say that up front.
Okay.
But I will say I bought some painting stuff over the last couple of weeks because of this book, and I've been dabbling in the painting because painting sounds fun. This book makes painting sound fun, so I got some painting stuff. I don't have to explain myself to you. I got some painting stuff.
I'm happy for you.
I'm not good at it, obviously, because why would I be? But it is fun to kind of dabble around in paints. But like one thing that was occurring to me is like, is it really realistic to paint as fast as Edgar is depicted as painting in the book? And the truth is, I have no idea. It's totally possible that it is possible to paint like a whole ass painting in like an evening. I really don't know, but I will say that like him spending several days working on this large detailed
Yeah.
painting of this portrait of Wireman, this like very like careful. You get the sense that it's meant to be just like very precise and photorealistic, except for the clear exception of like there being a floating brain. Um, Tells us that he really cares about this. He really wants to see this through. And maybe in some sense, it's harder for him to do it because he doesn't feel this itch. He doesn't feel this artistic compulsion that the muse
Yeah.
isn't telling him to do this. But this is something that Edgar wants to do. And so what I see is, this is kind of King talking about, hey, sometimes art is more like this. Sometimes the artist wants to create something, but they don't feel compelled. They don't feel that spark. It feels more like work.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe the spark jumps in somewhere, unexpectedly perhaps. But I don't know. I really like the whole Wireman Looks West interlude for all those reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Like it is a fun kind of examination of the different ways of creating, and I feel like the mad dash finish, where you've kind of lost control and don't even know what you're doing, is like a romanticized version of what creation is. Like it's the biopic version of, like a band just sits down and then suddenly they're just all seemingly out of nowhere playing all the notes and having all the words for their hit song that just
Uh-huh.
like that's not how a song is created at all, actually. And I think a lot of artwork, the idea that like you just sit down and then like everything hits you over the course of one night and then you have this beautiful perfect painting that you don't even remember painting, is like the romanticized version of how painting and creation work, and that's not really how it works at all. It's a lot of work over time. Painting, I mean, like the good paintings you see, yeah, those take a lot of time. It's very work intensive. It takes a long, long, long time. It's much more often, I think, like how Edgar describes painting Wireman Looks West. But we're seeing like the kind of romanticized version of that taken here, and it's cool to see that, because I'm sure like at times it does feel like that. At times you feel like you just hit the inspiration overload and just go. But yeah, I think this is much more common and realistic.
Yeah. I will say the exception is, the Beatles and their writing Get Back. But other than that, yes, real
That was
art takes time.
that documentary, and that moment in that documentary is the most incredible thing
Uh-huh.
I've ever seen in my entire life. If you haven't watched the Beatles documentary on, was it Apple? No. Was it
I don't
Max?
remember. I don't
I don't remember.
remember.
No, it was Disney Plus. It's one of them.
I don't know.
Fucking Paul McCartney is just sitting there strumming,
Uh-huh.
and then suddenly he's got the beat to Get Back,
Uh-huh.
and then suddenly he's singing
Yeah,
lyrics,
he's
and it just, you see him write the song
right.
in real time.
He's
It's incredible.
he's just like scatting, and then there's some words in there, and then it's 5 seconds later they've got the song its own. Of
It's
course,
just incredible.
even that is somewhat compressed, but yeah, it's still
Yeah.
remarkable.
And also, that's the Beatles, you know?
Right. Yeah.
That's the exception, not the rule.
That's true.
I do want to just call attention, Matt, here to like the early parts of these paintings of Wireman Looks West as Wireman is sitting for Edgar. I just love that King spends the time to hit these beats of friendship. These characters joke around with each other. As we said, they have this kind of language of movie quotes and book quotes. They just share lasagna. Edgar shares the news from the Scoto gallery that they're going to come with the contract, and they talk about that, and they talk about that he wants Wireman to look at it, and Wireman's not sure. I don't know, man. It's just like the friendship between these two characters has from the very first page been integral to everything that's happening here. And what I love is King never loses focus on that, and he wants to spend the time to get us to understand why this is a man that Edgar has quoted constantly throughout the book. And I was thinking about this, and I feel like, honestly, and not to rag on Desperation again, but like these moments and this downtime and these just character beats are things that book was missing, that I really think that book was missing. And it's King doing some of his best stuff.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think the book just benefits from being able to kind of breathe, right?
Yeah,
It's because
exactly. Yeah.
Desperation was this sprint. It
Yep.
took place over the course of like 24 hours, basically. So.
Yep. All right. So, Edgar also at this time calls Ilsa to check in on her and also to invite her to his gallery showing that he's decided he's doing. And we see here, Matt, that the wheel of Ka is turning for the poor girl. Her fiance's tour has been extended, and that he's been hanging out with the new female singer in the group quite a bit.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's always a bad sign.
Uh-huh. Speaking of being the parent of an adult child, I love this moment here. And in any case, if something's going on, nothing is. I'm sure nothing is. But if something is, better now rather than after, than after we. Yes, I said, thinking that was so adult, it hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what we're doing, right? Like we talk about the adult children thing. This is what we're doing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wonder where we're going with this character, because even if Ilsa is heartbroken by this guy, it's like, hey, sometimes that happens. That's okay. That's recoverable, right? I mean, you don't want your kids to suffer, but you don't want to put bumper rails on the whole world for them either. So, I just wonder, like, what is the end point of this Ilsa arc?
Yeah, good question. Who knows?
Yeah.
So Dario Nanuzzi comes over, and of course they immediately fall in love with all the paintings and want to sign Edgar right away. He says he only wishes to hold back one set of paintings, Girl with Ship. That's the only series that he's going to hold back. Everything else will be fair to sell, and that's probably a good choice that will have absolutely zero repercussions long term in the book, right, Matt?
Yeah, the ship being, the ship clearly has no significance that I can see. Yeah. Right.
So he walks over to the Eastlake house to give the contract to Wireman to review, and while there, he has this interesting exchange with a completely zonked out Elizabeth. It says, "For no reason at all, I asked, was your father a skin diver, Elizabeth?" She turned her head slightly and cut her ancient eyes in my direction. Her upper lip lifted in a dog's grin. There was a moment. It was brief but seemed long when I felt another person looking at me. Or not a person at all. An entity that was wearing Elizabeth Eastlake's old, doughy body. Like a sock. Oh.
Yeah, it's tack.
It's an Edgar suit.
It's the Edgar suit. It's Edgar. It's we got Edgar. What? Yeah, I can't make that work. But yeah, it's creepy. It's creepy. I love the dog's grin is particularly creepy. I see. I can see that in my head. That's unpleasant.
It's just fun to sometimes look at how you can set mood with word choice, right? Like this is a thing that I love about stories and good storytellers is like just the words you pick for these sentences change the tone of it so much. Like she turned her head slightly and cut her ancient eyes in my direction, right? She didn't just turn her ancient eyes in my direction, she cut them. And then a dog's grin. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
Wireman poses an interesting question here, Matt, that I thought it'd be fun to talk about. What would happen if in the middle of you painting this painting of me, lightning struck Big Pink and burned it down and this painting? If you die in the picture, do you die in real life? If the picture isn't complete yet? What do you think, Matt?
Yes.
Oh, no. It occurs to me that it has been 3 weeks and we haven't yet talked about the picture of Dorian Gray in relation to this book yet, which seems wild.
It does seem wild. What's even wilder is that it didn't even occur to me. And I have read that book. I mean, I haven't read a lot of like the old literature that we're all supposed to have pretended that we read, but I did indeed read that one, and so it feels obvious now that you say it. But yeah, I think Wireman totally would have died. I mean, why else bring up this idea unless it's meant to seem like, oh shit, yeah, there's some danger to this magic that they're throwing around.
Yeah. What if he like tripped while painting and like his brush like sliced across his brain instead of just neatly painting it?
Yeah,
Jesus.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel like Dorian Gray did not do a sufficient job of hiding that picture. That's my opinion.
I don't even remember how that book ends is the thing. I know that the painting is uncovered, but what happens to it? Does it burn?
Well, when he looks at the painting, he like the painting stores all his people know picture Dorian Gray, right? Like he gets a painting, it's a magic painting that like all his age and
Sins.
time goes into the painting, and he remains youthful and perfect. And then one day he looks at the painting and everything flips, and
Okay.
there's at the end of the story is there's this random old man on the floor of Dorian Gray's room,
I see.
and there's a painting with a beautiful youthful version of
I
Dorian
see.
Gray.
So
Yeah,
so it's just that he's not supposed to look at the painting. Okay.
yeah,
Then
yeah.
yes, you're correct that he didn't.
I
But
forget.
that's
I it's been so long since I read the story. I forget exactly how he it accidentally looks at the painting.
yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
the cool thing about that story, which is not people talk about this about the book as if it's all about age, but it is about age, but it's also about like debauchery and living a debauched life that
yeah, yeah.
erodes the soul. So
Hmm.
the picture wasn't just his physical deterioration, but his like spiritual deterioration too,
Correct.
and
Yep.
that's
Yep.
very much about this idea of being a libertine, and what that does
Hmm.
to the soul. So anyway, just
Yeah, and now you put off the consequences of that for as long as possible, but they will always catch up to you eventually.
exactly, yeah.
Yep. So yeah, does that directly relate to this book? Not really, but it is another book about a magical painting, so I thought we should probably talk about it at some point.
Sure. Sure.
Um, so from here we come to the close of this week's chapter, essentially, and I want to point out that shockingly, I really love this book. I know you're really surprised.
Yeah.
But I love that Edgar is like considering these days working on Wireman's portrait and the painting he's doing, his best days on Duma Key, and it is because it isn't the mad scramble of the obsessive possessed artist, but just the meticulous journeyman like work of a creator creating. And like I do feel like we talked that this is King showing all the sides of the act of creation, and no surprise to me that like the work, like the journeyman, like day in day out work of this is something that King highly values, and so his characters do as well.
Yeah. I like all that. That's there's a lot of different kinds of creation, and I think King is talking about how those are all part of the tapestry that is being a creator.
Mm-hmm. I really did like this part though, where Dario signs him up to as part of like the gathering of press around this gallery event he's going to have. He's told he has to go to a college and give a lecture on art, and, and Edgar is like,
Uh-huh.
I don't know anything about art.
Yeah.
The quote here is, Dario, these people know stuff. They've taken courses. I bet most of them were art majors, for Christ's sake. What do you want me to do? Stand up there and say, duh? And I think what he said is Pollock basically said that exact
Uh-huh.
thing.
Yeah.
But I wonder if this is a reflection on King and his feelings about like the act of creation, his act of creation, because like clearly King knows a shitload about writing and literature, right? He has studied it extensively, like, and he is very knowledgeable. Like we read his memoir, like we if you also read Danse Macabre, like he talks about horror fiction, like a great amount of intelligence. But I wonder if sometimes he also feels like a phony when he gives answers that are just like, I don't know, man, these ideas just come to me. And it's
Yeah.
like, and that might be true on some level, but like, it's just like, does he feel like he doesn't belong? Because we talked about this a lot with a lot of his books, and his insecurity when it comes to his role in, like American literature.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, that feels right to me. I think for every creator, I think there's a sense that you can't really take too much responsibility for your talents,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of feels fake to pretend that you fully understand where your creations come from. But
Yeah.
then it feels frustrating to your audience if you admit that you don't know where your
Yeah.
creations come from, and so there's just a catch-22 there.
But
Um,
also, like, the real answer is probably the most boring, which is like if someone asks you the question like, where do your ideas come from, like what the fuck are you supposed to say to that? Well,
yeah,
I just I thought of them. I was using my brain one day, and I thought of something.
yeah.
So
It
it's just
seemed
so much
like the
more.
thing. Yeah,
It's just so much more romantic to be just like, I don't know. I was just, I was going on a walk and suddenly out of nowhere from a turtle began to sing in my
Uh-huh.
head. And I just had this idea. It didn't even feel like it was coming from me. That's so much more like romantic than the truth a lot of the times.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I hate to do this to you, Scott, but it's almost like the free will thing where it's like you can't really be responsible for the thoughts that choose to pop into your head, right? So ultimately, it's like you can't you can know what you can know when an idea came to you, but you can't really know where it came from because
Yeah.
it just floated up into your mind's eye. And
Yeah.
is that your fault? Like, did you do that? Not really. So
Yeah. Sure. Sure. I like it. I like it.
yeah.
So March the 4th comes, and with it, a giant storm and the conclusion of Wireman Looks West. Edgar, as we talked about, describes the work on this painting up until now as rational, but there's nothing rational about its conclusion as the storm rages and Edgar's ghost arm briefly appears before him. So, Matt, we talk about how most of this painting was painted during the day. The end of the painting, the conclusion of the painting, is in the dark. So the question is, would the magic, we know that this works, right? And Wireman's vision is restored and this is successful. Would this painting have worked? Would this magic have worked without this dramatic conclusion on this stormy, spooky night?
I'm inclined toward no.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the magic of the phantom arm was not involved until this last bit here, and it was
Yeah.
it was that magic that really did it. Although it's interesting to consider the opposite. It's very interesting to consider that if an artist really thinks that they're only capable of creating something great when there's when the muse is on them, like, well, maybe that's not fair to them, maybe that's not true, because
Yeah.
he's clearly painting an excellent painting, and then a little bit of zest comes in there at the end. It's like, well, it was already an excellent painting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know, it's fun to think about it either way, actually.
Yeah, it does pose the question, and I think it's interesting to turn it over and like I think we need to see the full scope of the book, or before we like conclude on what King's thesis around art is in this
Mm-hmm.
story.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's all posing the questions for sure.
Yeah.
I love how everything in this is written, by the way. Like this conclusion of this chapter is just so wonderful. While he's painting in this frantic stormy night, beneath me, the murmur of the shells had become the gossip of dead things, telling secrets in bone voices. How could I have not heard that before? Dead things, yes. A ship had come here, a ship of the dead with rotted sails, and it had offloaded living corpses. They were under the house, and the storm had brought them to life. I could see them pushing up through the boneyard blanket of the shells, pallid jellies with green hair and seagull eyes, crawling over each other in the dark and talking, yes, because they had a lot to catch up on, and who knew when the next storm might come and bring them to life again. Yet still, I painted. It's the text changes. Like it really didn't jump out at me until I read it out loud right there. Like the nothing. This is Edgar Fremantle 4 years in the future relaying the events of Duma Key, right? Like
Uh-huh.
that is the established structure of the book. And then you see things like talking, yes, like with exclamation points, yes, dead things. Like it just seems so different and off in ways that really draw attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, just to say it, it's very gothic. It's written, is like you said, it's written almost in a different style. It's written in the
Yeah.
style of like a much older tradition of gothic literature.
Yep. I love it. So Edgar finishes the painting, and he finds Elizabeth's twin sisters waiting for him at the bottom of the stairs. They're corpsey, and they're repeating his anger management phrases back to him. It's not scary at all, Matt. I definitely was not scared at all.
Nope. No, it's great, actually. It's fantastic. And they're like, really there too. They're
Yeah,
not
that's the
just,
thing is he wakes up the next morning, the storm has blown his door in, and so there's sand and debris everywhere on his carpet, and definitely not tracks of little children feet. Definitely not.
Definitely not.
So yeah, the painting works. and Wireman's sight is cured. And that's where we leave this chapter. I love the final lines here, Matt. I thought I could sleep, and I could do it with the bedside lamp on if I wanted to. Reba would never tell. I could even sleep with her nestled in between my stump and my side. I'd done it before, and Wireman could see again, although even that seemed beside the point just then. The point seemed to be that I had finally painted something great, and it was mine. I thought I could sleep on that. So are we supposed to be worried about that or contented with that?
I feel like it's good. Like, I feel like he's sort of attaining some mastery of his talent, because it's not just like, why did you draw a seashell, a giant seashell, forebodingly sitting on the horizon or whatever? And it's like, I don't know. The arm did it. And this is like, I painted my friend Wireman because I want to save him and I love him. And that's the answer to that question. It's his choice. And maybe it was harder in some ways than those inspired paintings, but that feels more sort of mature. And I don't know. I find it to be a positive development, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Sure. I'm only asking because, we've just been primed for the kind of the uncertainty of creation. Like there's beauty and power in it, and I agree. Like, he saved his friend. He removed a bullet. He saved his life, and he gave him his sight back. With the power of art, he opened his friend's eyes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is something good to feel about for sure. But there is, the moment that while doing this thing, you're visited by ghosts, and it's troubling.
Yep.
All right, so that is it. That is our last chapter of the week. Next week, we are going to continue with the book. We're going to be reading from How to Draw a Picture 6 all the way through How to Draw a Picture 7. There are also 2 chapters in between those. Chapter 11 and 12 are mixed in there as well. So we're definitely moving forward in the story, and I think next week's going to be a good one, Matt. I hope you're excited.
I am.
All right, let's talk discussion question. What was our question from last week?
So, we were 1 weekend and we were enjoying Wireman, and we were asking ourselves, what are some of your other, non-Wireman favorite characters along in the mold of vaguely Wireman-esque, but doesn't have to be too much like Wireman. You know what we mean. And people did know what we mean, because they did a great job with this. So Apocalypse Wen 7 says, my favorite that type character has to be Judd Crandall. Somebody already said that they add. So I'll say a presage. Al Templeton from 11/22/63. I love a good curmudgeonly but likable guy giving sage advice to our protagonists before his grand adventure. See also Speedy Parker in The Talisman. That guy discussion also made me think about a different king archetype that Edgar falls into, the guy that's trying to put up a respectable front while fighting desperately against his rageful impulses. These characters are often secondary villains. Craig Toomey in The Langoliers, Danforth Keaton in Needful Things, or a protagonist turned villain, Barton Dawes in Roadwork, Jack Torrance in The Shining. Edgar Fremantle is an interesting inversion of this character type, in that, as opposed to the character becoming more and more unhinged, we see Edgar's rage the most extremely at the beginning of the story, and he is gradually starting to get more of a handle on it, hardly needing his rage doll at this point in the plot. As a first-time reader, I'm hoping Edgar can continue on this path. Stephen King isn't exactly known for letting his characters get off lightly.
Yeah, that's fun. My favorite thing about the answers to this question, Matt, by the way, are that we didn't define what that type meant, and so we get a lot of great examples. But it's like with our, you close your eyes and you think something's gothic, and it is gothic, even if you're not thinking of the actual definition of the words. Like, every one of these answers, I'm like, yeah, that is a that type character. You're right. Like, Judd Crandall is the perfect that type character, yeah. I think.
That's why I love giving people these open-ended questions, because I it's fun to see what direction their mind goes in.
Yeah, and I do really like that examination of Edgar as well, because like he is defined primarily from the first pages of the book as a guy who barely has hold of his rage, and that is That is not something that you would think would endear you to a character. But King put so much work into making us like this guy that you can almost forget sometimes that he has severe rage problems.
Right. Right.
But they're still there. But yeah, he is doing better with them as the book moves on. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Next, we have Pear Jane, who says, that character. I choose to interpret that character as a trusted advisor with a great backstory and an unlikely friendship, and the first and best answer for me is Dick Halloran. My older kid is currently reading The Shining, and I'm listening along with her on some nights, so this might be recency bias, but honestly, I like Dick Halloran. Literally everyone likes Halloran. If you don't like Halloran, you're an objectively bad person and should be judged accordingly. In fact, I'm pretty sure he and Wireman probably crossed paths at a Florida restaurant at some point in the 1990s, and they exchanged a nod and a smile, and Halloran sent Wireman a margarita on the house just because Wireman complimented Halloran's fried catfish. And that is the truth. Yeah. I mean, there's no reason to think that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So it did.
I now permanently see that as an event that happened. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Great.
Dick
Thanks.
Halloran, another great example of this character. Like a perfect answer.
Yeah. Love it. TN Bugdock says that character for me has been and always will be Judd Cranville from Pet Sematary. It was the first King novel that I ever read at far too young an age. What were my parents thinking? Judd had so many good lines and sage gauge advice in that book. The soil of a man's heart is stonier. What you buy is what you own, and what you own always comes home to you. And sometimes dead is better are all lines that have stuck with me for 30 plus years.
Sometimes dead is better is the classic one, but I really do love the soil of a man's heart is stonier. I love that.
Yeah.
Baby, Can You Dig Your Sam says, since I suspect that more than a few of us would answer Henry Layton from the Black House, I'm going to stray from King and dig into my 80s and 90s sensibilities. A few characters that come to mind are Sergeant Al Powell, the cop at the end of the walkie-talkie in the original Die Hard movie. I don't know how much of a trusted advisor Walter Sobchak is in The Big Lebowski, but he's definitely one-of-a-kind character and friend of the dude. To me, that character is all the things Pear Jane suggests, with a super dose of coolness. So with that in mind, I might have to go with Silent Bob. He just hangs around all day, smoking pot, raising eyebrows, and quietly observing everything that goes on around him. And when he speaks, it's with a few words, but oh so profound. You know, there's a million fine-looking women in the world, dude, but they don't all bring you lasagna at work. I have so many thoughts on that answer. It's great. I love it.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast about Die Hard this week, Matt, and do you remember the plot for Sergeant Al Powell? Do you remember what his arc was?
Didn't he shot somebody and then his happy resolution is he shoots somebody again?
Yes. This is played by Reginald Vell Johnson, who, you know, they basically just took that character and then made Family Matters about that same character. But yeah, he shot a kid. Like the thing he tells John McClane is, I shot a kid. And then, yeah, his resolution is he learns how to use his weapon again. And it's not even, they said like, I shot a kid, but he like lived, he turned out, he killed a child.
Yeah, he got over his fear of discharging his service weapon at a living person. It's a good job.
Oh, gosh, the 80s were a wild time. I love it.
I also this answer is also forcing me for the first time to consider the like importance of the wise silent presence who just watches the world go by around him is in fact the director.
Mm-hmm.
Who is in fact orchestrating everything that's going on around him.
That's true. That's true.
Just kind of a fun thought.
Ironically, it was Kevin Smith that was the guest on the podcast I listened to about Die Hard, and it got me thinking this week about, you know, I feel like we all went through a phase of Kevin Smith where like we loved him to death and he was a genius, and then he kind of fell out of favor, and I feel like I'm back to loving Kevin Smith again. Like I don't love a lot of his recent movies at all, but like as a person, like listening to him talk about shit, I think he's really, really, really fascinating.
Yeah,
and he knows his shit, man. He really does.
Sure. Yeah, I think I've gone back and forth over time, and now I'm so old that why begrudge someone their interesting forays into weird movies that I might not like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Steve Living Room says, "You're right, BCYDYS."
Now, do you know what that means? Quick, go.
Um, nope. Oh,
That's
baby, can
baby,
you
can
dig
you
your
dig your
Sam?
Sam?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
stared at
Yes.
that for 5 minutes before I
Okay.
figured it out, just so
Yeah.
you know.
If I had just kept reading, I would have gotten it though. But okay, I am definitely
Sure.
I am definitely answering Henry Layden from Black House. What an amazing character. Love his wit and charm and personality, but just the way he carries himself is what I love about him. Unreal that someone can make up a fake person that affects me so much. Reason number 1407 why I love King. Not reason 1408.
No, that was that was a real missed opportunity there.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. I mean, yeah, Henry Layden was for whatever reason. I agree. I agree. Like he just really sticks in your mind as a character.
He's awesome. I love him. He's my favorite part about Black House, hands down, for sure.
Yeah.
Guilty Spark 113 says that character would have to be Bill Hodges. He might be the main in the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, but in any other book with Holly Gibney, he's always in the back of her mind, giving her the ideas on how would Bill do this or guide her to complete what she is doing. It's a great answer. You haven't met him yet, but you will, Matt. You will.
Okay.
Guilty Spark also says, this is my first time being able to participate in a weekly discussion. I have followed along every book podcast in order for the last 2 years. I've really enjoyed this journey. Every book has been my second or third time through, and I've enjoyed each more this round. Duma Key is by far my favorite, and it makes me so excited to listen to you guys do your deep dive into it. Well, thank you. That's very nice. Glad you're getting to participate in the discussion questions.
And it's very cool to hear that it's your favorite. That makes me slightly more excited than I already was, which was pretty exciting. All right, Aqua Lungfish says, first, I love that King has so many that guy characters. A lot have already been said, but there's just so many more and of such different varieties. The big ones are great, but I especially like the examples of this that are a little different, either by being more active, like Tim in the Institute, or not even a real character in the book, like Tom Gordon in The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. However, my favorite that guy in King work is probably Red in The Shawshank Redemption. While the book is from his point of view, he's not really the main character. He's the supporting character for Andy, giving help and wisdom where necessary, but not often directly causing a change in the direction of the story. Plus, he still gets his own little bit of character development due to the actions of the real protagonist. Of course, it's possible I like him so much because he's played by the best Irish actor around in the movie. I get it. It's funny. For a second, I had to like pull together some nodes in my brain, but yes, that is delightful.
That's a great answer. I love that. Cyan Cicada says that character is always saying some stuff that if I heard someone else say it, I'd have thought that sounds like some Stephen King shit. I'm roughly 60% through King's oeuvre, but my standout is Henry Layden, filed by Wireman with dishonorable mention to the Kid. The Kid. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I never would have thought of the Kid as someone belonging on this list, but the Kid is sort of like the worst imaginable version of that character, you know?
Yeah, it works. It works, yeah. Man.
Talks You That says, I wanted to say Samwise. So Talks You That is reaching beyond King. I wanted to say Samwise, but I think he moved on from that character to the character somewhere along the way. So I present for your consideration Dewey from Malcolm in the Middle. He was wise beyond his years, often the only one to keep his head in troubling situations, could hit you with the cold hard truth when you needed it most, and still came across very likable. He was just sort of there when you needed him to be. Yeah, Dewey.
It's been too long since I've watched Malcolm in the Middle. A truly great show.
I agree. Underrated, I would dare say.
A lot of people look at that show and are like, I don't know how that guy, Bryan Cranston, could ever become Walter White. But I look at that show and I go, I know exactly how this guy could play Walter White. It's all there. I mean, he's being goofy and silly and ridiculous, but it's all there.
Well, there's also there are episodes of that show where I remember laughing so hard, and it was usually Bryan Cranston doing physical comedy of some kind.
Yes, yeah.
So he's just really, really good at that stuff.
Yeah, Walter White throwing the pizza on the roof is right there in Malcolm in the Middle for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Ishmael75 says, somebody already mentioned 112263, but I'm going to go with a different character. Miss Mimi from the school. She is the first person to really welcome George Amperson, and overall, she's a lovely woman who makes a big impact while remaining a small character. Love Miss Mimi, and we all need someone like her in our lives. Matt, I am so excited for you to read 112263. I know this answer means nothing to you, and it's not a spoiler, so you don't have to worry about it, but yeah, I'm so excited for you to read this book. I agree with you, Ishmael. Miss Mimi is a great choice for this.
Yeah, I just sort of played like static in my brain while you were reading that answer. So yeah, I'm excited too, obviously.
All right. Well, thank you everyone who sent those in. That was great. That was really enjoyable. I love that character, and I love seeing all that characters.
Me too.
All right, let's do next week's question. This is we'll see how this one works, Matt. This is an interesting one, I think.
All right. So Wireman Goes West and Girl with Ship are described in such beautiful, exquisite detail that I can't help but want to see what these finished products actually look like. Are there any other incredibly descriptive things in written stories that you wish you could see with your eyes?
This is the genesis of this is I just like Googled Wireman Goes West and hoped that someone had made an approximation of what this painting actually looks like, and I was disappointed. Wireman looks west, rather. Sorry. And so I wish it existed, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that feel that way about a lot of things described in stories.
Yeah, I can think of a few examples. So I am very excited to hear the answers to this one.
Yeah, me too. But that is it for us this week. As we said, next week we will continue Duma Key with how to draw a picture 6 through how to draw a picture 7, including chapters 11 and 12 in the middle there. So get to reading. And I love this book. I love this book, man.
Me too. Remember, you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com, on x.com at kingslingerspod, or over on the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia. That's the best place to answer the discussion question and to just hang out if you want.
Yeah. I think following us there is great. We try to push a lot of news and scheduling updates and stuff going on there. So any social media is a great place, but Reddit I think it just works for like conversations and stuff. I don't know. I just enjoy it. I enjoy Reddit.
Me too.
Although they sent us an email this week about like their IPO and letting us buy in on the ground floor, and I was like, no, thank you.
That sounds a little questionable.
I'm not an expert of stocks, but I don't know if going public is really the best choice for Reddit.
Yeah, it seems like social networks always go in the toilet when they go public, but we will see.
We will. If you are not already subscribed, you just do it. I'm tired of saying this line. You're all subscribed by now, right?
They are, Scott. Yeah. Don't worry.
Okay. Thank you for subscribing, everyone.
However, they're not all supporting us. So,
how dare you?
Those of you who are not supporting us on Patreon, please consider heading on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and supporting us at any level you feel like. But if you support at certain levels, then you'll get access to our monthly Patreon only bonus podcast. Previously we talked about 17,000 different King adaptations, and now we're talking about the TV show Castle Rock. And that is a very enjoyable TV show that I recommend, and you can kind of follow along with us as we make our way through the first season.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, if you cannot afford to pledge and be part of the Doof Media Patreon community, that is absolutely okay. There are tons of ways to help us out. You can share the podcast. You can just tweet. Are they called tweets anymore?
I think they're literally called posts now.
That's boring.
That's enormous, so boring. Enormous destruction of brand value. Yes,
you can post and repost and sub post. It just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't
work. You can also leave us rating and reviews. This week's spotlight review comes from Michael D, who gives us 5 stars and says, Kingslingers, this has become my favorite podcast. I don't know if I'll ever catch up, as I found this a few years late, but I'm really enjoying the ride so far through the entire Dark Tower series, and now halfway through Salem's Lot. I had to write my review. I wasn't always a big reader, but I think that's changed now, and I have you two to thank for helping me see how beautiful books and writing can really be. So for that, I'd like to say thank you, Sai. Long days. and pleasant nights. That's like one of the nicest things anyone's ever said to me. Seriously, I love writing. It is beautiful, and if we could be a small part at making people like it more, that's amazing.
Yeah, that makes me feel all warm inside. So
Yeah,
thanks for.
I don't know what to do with that,
Yeah.
and so we will simply end the show as I am blushing uncontrollably. All right, folks, we will see you here next week for more Duma Key. I can't wait. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.